Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Glassix Spotlight. Today, we've got a real treat for you. Steve Towers is joining us in the studio. Now, if you're wrestling with customer experience, if you're scratching your head over process innovation, or if digital transformation has got you in a twist, Steve's the guy you want to talk to. He's the mastermind behind the CEM method, which has been a game changer for folks all over. From the classrooms of Kellogg School of Management to the boardrooms of the biggest brands. Steve's been in the game for over 40 years. And let me tell you, his trophy cabinet is bursting at the seams. We're talking top 30 global guru bursting. This man's influence stretches far and wide in the world of CX, BPM, you name it. Steve is also the brains behind the BP Group, a powerhouse community where the best of the best in customer experience and process management come together. And when he's not steering companies towards success, he's penning number one bestsellers that are lighting up the business world. But what's really cool about Steve is that he's all about making success, happiness, and the future something you can actually plan and achieve. He's got the blueprint and he's here to share it with us. So buckle up, listeners, because Steve Towers is about to drop some serious knowledge on us. Steve, welcome to Glassix Spotlight. We're stoked to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much, Ran. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
Sure. So, Steve, before we jump right in, could you tell us a little bit about your journey at BP Group? I mean, like, at which stage the company's at? What the company's actually doing, or anything else exciting worth sharing?
Yeah, sure, will do. My corporate career was primarily in banking, and I worked for Citibank in the US. I was the director of technology and operations back in the day for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And we were doing big re-engineering projects back in the day. And a colleague and I realized in the early 1990s that we were spending a lot of money as senior executives on consultants. So we said, well, we should do our own dog fooding then. And we sold in to the then CEO of Citibank the idea that we would do re-engineering from the outside in. In other words, we would consult with Citibank to actually do a transformation program without all the baggage associated with the usual things that come with certain consultants. And that was the foundation of the BP Group back over 30 odd years ago. However, I will say that my exposure to artificial intelligence goes back to the start of my career, some 40 odd years ago, when we were building expert systems. So I suppose I'm multifaceted, as Rand said. I've worked in technology, programming, and systems analysis, came over into the process world, was involved in re engineering and BPM. And then in the 20 odd or so years ago, we were working with a company called Virgin, and some of you will know the name. And Virgin said to us, "Your methodology is great, Steve, but it's missing something." And of course, my response was, "Well, no, it's all inclusive. It covers everything." And they go, "No, it's missing the customer." And I was at that time Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. So our methodologies were very much based around industrial age thinking. So we worked with Virgin for a number of years at that time. And in 2006, co-wrote a book which we launched called Customer Expectation Management. And that was the birthing for us of the CEM method, latterly known as the Customer Experience Management Method, which for us is the codification of the success of those leading organizations on the planet. So our ethos back in the early 90s was our key performance indicator was how quickly can we upskill organizations to be able to do this stuff for themselves. So hence operating as a not-for-profit, bpgroup.org. That's what we've done for the best part of 30 odd years. So something's gone right.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So I really like the story. So a little bit more about the CEM method. I read somewhere it can be implemented in over 137 countries.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we have, in terms of global licensed users, over 140,000 now. And the essence of the method, we wanted it to be, it still is a very pragmatic, very results oriented system, which allows people to embrace what is effectively their next practice, but the best practice of those companies like Amazon, the Apples, the usual suspects that we can name drop. But 50% of my time I spend retained with those companies doing this stuff. And on the basis of their learning, what they allow us to do is then integrate into the CEM method their approaches. So the type of thing like Amazon's North Star approach, for instance, is in there. And only just recently we've updated the version to version 15. So it's continually moving forward in the sense that, as we know, we're surrounded by, this whole world of generative AI these days. So what are the best practices around that? So that we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. We can actually learn from those people who are actually sort of breaking new ground, learn from their mistakes, incorporate and codify their success, and then make them accessible to a wide range of people. So yes, as you were saying, Rand, 137 countries and 140,000 people. And we work across the BP Group is through a series of partners. So we had 40 odd global partners around the planet who are licensed to both train and consult using the method.
Yeah, I love that. We're all about the CX eventually. Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So today's episode called A Talk with Steve Towers, the Generative AI Revolution in CX. And we're going to jump right in. Steve, how is generative AI reshaping the landscape of customer experience?
Okay, I mean, the subject is obviously a very hot one. Only this, we think when generative AI, in the sense of ChatGPT, was only launched in November, 22. So it was still relatively early days. But as we all know, the announcements are coming thick and fast. So it really is every single day that goes by, there's several announcements from the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Metas, you name it. They're all doing something and they're all in this space. Now, as you already mentioned there, Ran, at the end of the day, everything comes back to customer experience. It's the customer who creates all the work for our organizations. So it makes sense that we should be focusing our attention on how do we deliver successful customer outcomes. So in the context of generative AI, that puts our whole CX world on steroids, if you like, because many of the things that we've been saying for the last 15 or 20 years are now able to come to fruition in double quick time. So with those sort of things in mind, setting the sort of the scene there, we've got areas. I won't dive into detail. I'm certainly not going to go technical today, but we've got areas like personalization. The ability to be able to understand our customers at a singular level. So whether we're a B2C, a B2B, a government, a not-for-profit, a charity, or whatever, getting a real intimate understanding of our customers and the data associated with that allows us to really personalize a service and a product we can deliver. Likewise, there's things that we can do which have always been like we quest for 24/7 service, don't we? We want to deliver that for our customers, but it could become inordinately expensive. But with generative AI now, we can offer that as a service where people can interact, in multimodal models. So, through the phone, through the web, through their apps, any way they want to, have a consistent set of interactions and be able to capture that in a way that seamlessly can connect with customer successes. The other sort of areas we've got are naturally, automating those mundane tasks and also getting into, on that machine learning side, predictive engagement with customers. So understanding that there's a pattern of behaviors, and if we can identify those patterns of behaviors and then accordingly construct our offerings in such a way that we can preempt what customers really need, even when they don't necessarily need it themselves, we're going to be in a better place. And then, of course, the whole idea of learning is that we constantly update the systems that we're using. And in the past, again, I think back 40 odd years when we had expert systems and things like Crystal, the overhead associated with coding for them and capturing expertise made those systems ultimately unusable. Whereas now, of course, with the generative AI, we have an ability to both capture information and reuse that information in the moment. We don't have to wait, for somebody to go away and code it and then come back and so on like that. So it's a fantastic time to be involved in business, and I'm so privileged to still be around to actually see this thing happening around us every single day. It's so exciting.
We are privileged that you are around, actually,
Well,
um, and,
thank you.
and and that and that is very much as well connect with what we do here at Glassix. So we have coupled conversational AI with GPT-4 engine, and we are now building for some of our customers the one that is very important for them to be in the forefront of technology and provide an excellent customer experience. We build generative AI chatbots. So by that, we're basically saying, okay, well, there are chatbots. No one likes them for 100 million one reasons, right? But they are chatbots, but we can do it better. If we use generative AI, we can have chatbots that actually respond, that actually understand, that are actually empathetic enough to understand not only user behavior, but also understand user emotions. And we're building this, and I know it's a big announcement, and we're still in the process. We have a few processes that are currently live with our customers. Um, and this is at a glance how we touch generative AI blended with automation that kind of reflects on customer experience.
Brilliant. I mean, and I think we can all sympathise with that idea of interfacing with some of those chatbots, which were precursors to what we've got now, and almost there's many examples as we know out there now where you don't actually realise you're actually talking to artificial intelligence anymore because the information is there, it's already at hand, and it's seamless. So it's those organizations that are able to embrace that type of technology are really at the forefront of delivering those successful customer outcomes.
Another point on that, I have to say, from our inner data, is that what we have discovered is that the smaller organization, we serve a handful of different customers, from the smallest
Uh-huh.
organizations to large enterprises. And what we have discovered is that we just launched our conversational AI suite May this year. So it's been around for 6 months now. And what we have found is that looking at our data is that the mid-sized organizations are the ones to be pioneers in adopting this emerging technology. And the ones that are more on the enterprise level are more cautious for whatever reason, which is an interesting stat.
Yeah, and of course you've got a level of inertia with those larger organisations as well, unless they truly understand. I think one of the differentiators in the CX space for people who get it and those who don't is, as we know, the customer's the cause of all our work, right? Which some people say, oh, if it wasn't for the customer. But if that is truly the case, then articulating what success looks like for the customer and then aligning everything to delivering against those needs really differentiates those organizations who get it from those who don't. And what we tend to see as well is in larger organizations who are really circumspect and it takes them a long time to do change anyhow, with the space in and around generative AI, that they're not able to articulate it in a meaningful way. Now, there are obviously people who are out there who are way ahead of everybody else. And I think the middle ground can really learn from those organizations who are really fleet of foot to be able to embrace some of those practices quickly, and not have to go up that very steep learning curve for some organizations where they're having to almost rethink the way they do technology, rethink the way they do operations, and that they're so busy with the politics of that that they actually forget about the customer.
Which is the most important thing. And as you
Of course.
mentioned, the beginning of our call today, you at the very early stage of your career, you forgot about the customer. And when you realize that, everything turns around.
Yes, yes, I would agree with that very much so.
Great. So, Steve, if I'll ask if you can share one success story when generative AI significantly enhanced CX. I mean, something maybe that you experienced firsthand in your years of experience.
Okay. I think one of the we can all talk about and search for the usual sort of suspects of stories, but one that we're very much aware of and through our partners involved with is a company called Luminance who've launched a product called Autopilot. Now, I know it's not necessarily the most sexy of industries when you're in the legal profession, but what these guys were trying to do is to free up the human capacity and the learning of barristers so that they could get on with barristering, if that's such a thing, rather than reviewing contracts all the time. So, what Luminance have done is they've used generative AI to create a product called Autopilot which allows a negotiation between two chunks of AI around things like non-disclosure agreements. So where you're working, in different countries and different vertical domains, that having that negotiation take place between AI and then being able to produce that in such a way that they talk about reducing the cycle time for that from typically 5 days down to 4 minutes. Now, that is unheard of. But the real win is freeing up barristers to do what they're really good at, with their legal knowledge, their negotiation, their representation skills, rather than bogging them down in complex contracts, which AI can understand and then give direction to. It needs oversight, of course, as these things do. But that's a really good example of an effective use of technology, if you like, to really aim at the successful customer outcome much more quickly than was possible in the past.
Wow, I can imagine how much they save on operational costs.
Oh, absolutely. And it touches, we talk about something in CX called the Triple Crown. And if we're doing CX successfully, we'll simultaneously reduce costs, grow revenues, and enhance service. So I'll oftentimes say to senior executive teams, if you're doing CX and you're not achieving the Triple Crown, and that was a phrase given to us by a guy called Jim Siner, who was the former SVP of research at Gartner back in the day. If you're not delivering that Triple Crown, whatever you're doing isn't CX from the outside in, which is our philosophy, if you like.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. So, Steve, what are some common misconceptions about implementing generative AI in CX, and how can businesses overcome them? What are the big pitfalls or misconceptions, if you wish, about implementing generative AI in CX?
Okay, I think we just touched on that one, perhaps with Luminance, where there's this underlying fear that AI is going to replace human beings. Whereas when it's done effectively, it actually accentuates the ability of humans to get on with doing what humans are good at, an AI to take some of that drudgery away. So the spectre, the shadow hanging over us of, oh, this is going to replace humans. Well, in certain jobs and roles which are very transactional, yes, it will. But if we're wanting to add value to a customer relationship and deliver success, again, whether it's B2C or B2B, then removing some of the things that get in the way of doing that makes sense. And AI is very good at that. Another challenge and a misconception is because there's so much news coming out all the time, and some of these tools are relatively easy to access now, is that implementation is going to be quick and easy. Well, in our experience, change takes time. Assimilation of a changed way of working can take time as well. So we have to understand the promises that we make as we help our organizations make these transformations, that it's not so much the technology that's the logjam, it's the mindsets that go with it. How things get done around here, how we can change things, how we can focus better on those successful customer outcomes. So, from my point of view, the generative AI isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to solve all our problems. It's that next wave of thinking which enables our people and our organizations in a human centric way to be able to use their skills to actually deliver success for our customers. And I
Right.
think I think another big concern which we've seen with some of the organizations we've been working with recently talk about privacy, and both privacy from the point of view of, my goodness me, using these massive data sets and acquiring all this knowledge, if you like, of different customers, that may infringe on certain laws and privacy protections that we've got. But on the other hand, as we know, there are parts of that technology which can actually, if you like, put a ring fence around the privacy elements and let the generative AI do what it's really good at, which is understanding, intuiting, is then being able to forecast forward. So I think some of those privacy concerns, that they're very valid, But just as we discussed earlier on, there's announcements every day, and many of the governments around the planet are now discussing new laws. And only in this sort of last week, a company called AliveCore, who specialise in medical, particularly in sort of cardiology, have been signed off by the FDA in the US for the use of AI powered diagnosis, which can really help people who've got, heart arrhythmias and things like that. Now, in those sort of instances, some of the misconceptions, you may read that and you may think, my golly, we could adopt that very quickly. But you've got to understand it's about a change in the way of working, which you can adopt quickly. You can win that triple crown, but at the same time, it's not cowboy territory. We shouldn't be rushing out there, shooting off in different directions. We have to be cognizant of the regulations that are in place and work within those frameworks to help those frameworks evolve as well. So that's some of the misconceptions, if you like, at a sort of a business level. Overcoming those is about taking a phased learning approach, I call it, where what you can do is you can articulate and iterate the learning in and around the systems as we develop them. Another area as well is in and around how we measure success. And it's always been a bugbear around CX. If you
Curious,
whatever you measure is
yeah,
what you're going to
I'm
get.
actually curious about
Sorry,
this
Dan.
metrics, success metrics. How do we measure success in this area?
Yeah, well, in the method, one of the mechanisms we use within the CEM method is the approaches which are objectives and key results. And part of the challenge with that is frequently people doing work in that from a very theoretical point of view will talk about, yeah, we've identified the objectives and we've identified the key results. We came in on time to budget and achieved the deliverables, but we're still not moving the dial in terms of the customer. And my point to them would be is, okay, are all your objectives aligned to deliver successful customer outcomes? They're not just about doing things, they're about moving the dial for the customer. So in that sort of thing, when you're creating through objectives and key results, sets of KPIs, those key performance indicators should all be focused outside in. In other words, they should be focused against the result you're trying to achieve on behalf of your customer, not just necessarily being able to finish projects much more quickly and on time within budget, but are we really moving the dial in terms of helping the customer get what they need?
Hmm. And these OKRs you mentioned are obviously very personalized per organization and per their operation and based on their customers, I guess.
Absolutely. And you've hit on a nice point there. And another thing, 40 odd years ago, we had something called management by objectives. And unfortunately, that ran into the sand because I've already alluded to. If your objectives are only focused on what you're doing and not on what you're delivering, ultimately they'll fall by the wayside. People won't be interested. But exactly to that point, Ran, if you're focused on personalized OKRs, in other words, you can go down to the singular individuals within our organizations who are tasked with delivering things, and their set of metrics is associated with complementing the alignment to the delivery of a successful customer outcome. They can be at that individual level because we have generative AI that understands your role, it understands what you're trying to achieve, and it should be able to enhance that with bang up to date data, which can allow you to progressively deliver more and more successful customer outcomes. So it's one of those areas that people sometimes at conferences where I'm doing keynotes, people will say, "Oh yes, Steve, we're doing that CX stuff, and we've done your objectives and key results, and now we've got generative AI, and it's all in there." And immediately I'll say to them, "Okay, can I see your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement?" And they'll go, "Why do you want to see that?" And I'll say, "Well, whatever it is you're doing, if you're not simultaneously winning the triple crown, in other words, reducing your costs, growing your revenues, enhancing your service, you're not doing whatever it is you're doing right." And I know I can talk from that perspective, having been around as long as I am and being long in the tooth about it. But at the same time, people can easily delude themselves that they're doing the right things. When, again, to go back to the old sayings, you may be doing things right, but are you doing the right things? That applies with generative AI more so than ever.
Absolutely. And I think it also very much connects to feedback loops. which is one thing that often get overlooked in many organizations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, Steve. I'm very curious to know what's the future of CX in your mind, of course. What the future of CX with the continued advancement and of generative AI, how it's going to look, what we should expect.
Okay. Well, we can start to think about there's trends that are emerging. So, one of the trends that's often being talked about these days is that personalization of interactions with the customer. And hyper personalization, we see that in terms of, say, product development with companies like Adidas, who are developing, training and running shoes down to the singular customer level. Now, being able to do that from that CX perspective, where we can articulate people's needs in terms of buying habits, the public profiles, and so on like that, and really, really personalize the products and services that we're delivering. So it's not, say, for instance, you're a bank and you're delivering home loans and mortgages and things like that. Why don't we personalize those, bang up front? Instead of trying to force fit everybody into the same product and the same process, the opportunity we've got is to really differentiate ourselves in that way. Another area that I see really developing rapidly is the conversational interface, and we've touched on that idea of chatbots and smart chatbots, as I would think about it, where they're able to carry that conversation across many channels simultaneously. It's not like we have to start over again every time we change a channel. We have to start over again.
What's so
Oh,
called the omni-channel experience, which I can
yeah.
share a bit more if that's exactly what we do here at Glassix. Please.
Brilliant. That's good. Good. I mean, the sort of developments that you guys are doing, are really sort of breaking new ground. But at the same time, as you take the learnings from organizations who are embracing these ideas, you're actually able then to deliver them more so to your customers much more quickly. And I think that sort of ability to learn from each other is now, part of the future of CX. In the past, we've had I'll give you one example. One of the bugbears I've got: retrospective public and private surveys. So trying to find out how we've performed. Say you go and stay at a hotel and 2 weeks later you get a survey. We should know in the moment how we're performing as a hotel. Now, there are some hotels who do that. People, like Virgin in America, they've got several hotels where they're actually in the moment articulating that in the context of customer experience. And instead of waiting to get a complaint, they're acting on things in the moment. Now, generative AI can give us that ability to actually assimilate that data and churn it out very quickly and then give guidance to our people, our employees. So we have a very much more human centric approach, both internally and externally. I think that is a massive growth area in terms of CX is preemptive and predictive analytics based on the patterns of behavior that we understand our customers have in terms of meeting their own needs. I think the another area which I've been involved with some of my colleagues recently has been this whole idea of immersive customer experiences. And oftentimes organizations will describe a customer experience as the first interaction with your organization to the last interaction. Whereas, as we know from an outside in perspective, the customer experience starts way before that first interaction and carries on way beyond that last one. So, when we talk about immersive customer experience, we're talking about the customer experience, not just with ourselves as an organization, but trying to meet a need, trying to identify how do I create this solution for myself. And so it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between our organization and the actual customer as well. And if we can move up and down what I think of in old fashioned terms, the supply chain, the customer experience, from when the need arises to when the outcome's achieved, we could deliver so much more for those customers than we could just by singularly delivering, say, a bank does, a mortgage product or something like that. We can actually have a look at lifestyle needs and harness that particular need in a way that we cover all interactions through partnerships and things like that. So there's some good examples of those emerging as we speak.
Right. Steve, before we wrap up, I've got one more question that I'm sure that our listeners are going to love. Well, you've been a champion of change and innovation throughout your career, and I'm curious, obviously, to hear your point of view from your experience in terms of like Looking at the intersection of customer experience and technology, what's the one piece of advice you'd give businesses looking to not just adopt but truly thrive in the era of generative AI?
Okay, I'm going to relate this back to one of the chaps I've already mentioned, Jim Siner, who's one of my colleagues over there in the States. And one of the pieces of research Jim's just done, and I'll make this available to anybody who wants it. We integrated it into one of my keynotes in South Africa recently, where we were sort of saying one of the big things that's happening at these intersection points is there's a fear. And naturally, people will move away, try to move from fear rather than, deal with things in a very human way. And so what Jim did was do the research, and then we turned that into a management game where we say, okay, let's go and talk to the senior guys in the business. Let's list out our 10 greatest fears of generative AI in the CX context. Let's list them out. Let's understand, let's prioritize them, and then let's come up with action plans which can mitigate the risks associated with failure and a lack of understanding. But at the same time, which are the areas that we need to help our organization grow in competence in doing? So that sort of little management game, we've played it a few times now over the last few months in organizations, really allows you to remove this fear factor and begin to focus more on the opportunity. And how do we grow that out? How do we make this thing not as frightening as it seems that AI is going to take over the world, which it might do for goodness sake. But if we can help AI help our customers, then we'll all be moving in the right direction.
I always say AI won't be taking over the world. People who know how to use AI will.
Yeah, point taken. That's a good one.
Great. So, Steve, I think I'm going to speak on behalf of myself and our listeners. We can be more thankful for you coming in today. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. I really enjoyed it. I am sure our listeners will as well. Anyone who wants to follow Steve on, so go on his LinkedIn, and Steve is very active there. And check out the BP Group for more CX insights. Thank you very much, Steve.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jan. Very much enjoyed it.